Sheena, the immature play-by son of Eileen and Lepant. Sheena has always been somewhat of a fan favourite for his versatile fighting style, being as skilled as his father with a sword and as talented as his mother at magic. But in terms of story, Sheena's backstory has been limited to him womanizing while under the guise of journeying the land to train, much to his father's annoyance. Luckily for fans of Sheena, he was given a short story titled Star Chaser, which was included in the Genso Suikoden Short Story Collection 4, a book that released in Japan in June 2002. This short story takes place immediately after the events of Suikoden 1, and it shows a much different side to Sheena. Sheena tends to be presented as a womanizing mama's boy in the games, but this short story really explores his personality, his views and his beliefs, and it puts him at odds with his father's vision for the Toran Republic. The story begins with Sheena waking up in the middle of the night at Toran Castle when he heard the sound of wood creaking on the water. He made his way to the window to look outside and saw Gremio and Tyr rowing away on a small boat. He then spotted his father gazing out at the boat in a serious manner. Sheena returned to bed knowing that Tyr had decided to leave them. Before departing, Tyr had left a letter stating that in his absence all responsibility should be left to Lepant. Thanks to this letter, the castle and the Liberation Army's leadership was spared from any chaos. The next morning, representatives from towns and villages throughout the land came to the castle to exchange formal greetings with Lepant. They were then ushered into a room with Tesla and Sheena to inform them of the current situation in each region. Tesla took his time interacting with each representative, asking them many questions such as where their village is on the map, how many people and families live there, and documenting everything they said in great detail. As Tesla was speaking to a man named Mine, the chief of a small village called Ota, which is near Kuan, Sheena began compiling all of the relevant information about each town onto a single sheet, but he quickly became bored of his task as he was making many mistakes as he struggled to read Tesla's handwriting. Sheena yawned and noticed that the woman accompanying Mine was also growing bored and fighting off a yawn of her own. Their eyes met and they both smiled at each other. Sheena noticed that she seemed too young to be Mine's wife, but too old to be his daughter. Wondering what kind of relationship the two had, Sheena approached the woman and began speaking to her quietly, but not before noticing her sweet floral smell. Sheena asked her about her travels and the two conversed for a short while before Sheena attempted to flirt with her. The moment Sheena began hitting on her, the woman's expression changed from a smile to one of dissatisfaction. At that moment, Mine ended his conversation with Tesla and led the woman out of the room. He then returned to the room to confront Sheena, asking him how long does he think he'd let that kind of behaviour stand. Sheena cheekily responded by saying, "A little longer." He then told Sheena that just because he's the son of Lepant, it doesn't mean he's afraid of him. He then left the room. Sheena and Tesla gathered all of the documents and made their way through the castle to meet with Lepant. As they were walking down the hallway, Tesla asked Sheena if he has spoken to his father yet about what kind of work he plans to do in the future. Tesla suggested that maybe he'd rather be out on patrol instead of being cooped up in the castle all day dealing with documents. Sheena responded, "Huh?" Tesla continued by saying that as the son of the soon-to-be president, he's certain he'll be appointed an important job within the new republic. Sheena asked, what does him being the son of the president have to do with anything? He continued by saying that sons inheriting positions based on the power of their parents was the old way of royalty, and if the country is going to be a republic ruled by a president, shouldn't they all discuss the matter and collectively decide on who gets what roles? Tesla tried to persuade Sheena to listen, but Sheena put an end to the conversation as he vehemently disagreed with the old imperial system of governance. The two arrived at the meeting room on the top floor of the castle. Lepant and 9 others were sitting around a table discussing border security. The conversation soon shifted to who should be assigned as the military governor of each town. Sheena doubted what he was hearing as the men continued discussing military governance. Lepant noted that they only have enough people to assign to a few towns and circled back to an earlier proposal about assigning former imperial officers to the positions. The reactions of the men in the room were mixed. Some were in agreement, some showed minor concern, but none spoke out against the proposal. Sheena hated the old imperial system of rule. Under the Scarlet Moon Empire, military governors were prone to power and abused their positions for personal gain. It was inconceivable to Sheena how all of the people who banded together after suffering under the corruption of the Scarlet Moon Empire could so easily go along with a system they fought to overthrow. Sheena stepped forward and slammed his documents down onto the table, exclaiming that he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Lepant calmly responded that it's necessary to appoint military governors for the security of each town, as incidents could occur at any moment and they can't afford to dispatch men every single time something happens. Sheena responded by asking if it has to be the military who oversees the towns, as it will make the townspeople feel as if they are being monitored. Lepant replied by saying that he doesn't intend to monitor the people, but the presence of local military is necessary to maintain order. Sheena clenched the documents on the table under his fists in frustration and asked his father if it was really necessary. He continued by telling his father that he's supposed to be a representative of the country, not its ruler. He then explained to his father that watching and ruling over people by force of military is the exact same way of the empire that they despised and just overthrew. Lepant looked up at Sheena and replied that they aim to be a country where everybody, no matter how rich or poor, merchant or farmer, all hold the same power. He then explained that they need to clean up the towns on a case-by-case basis and that they can't interfere with everything all at once or the towns will never improve. Lepant and Sheena stared at each other from across the table as everyone looked on nervously. Sheena asked if it was really necessary to use former members of the Imperial Army to fill these roles. Lepant responded by saying that it can't be helped, that it'd be preferable if all of these positions could be filled by captains from the Liberation Army, but there isn't nearly enough people to fill these roles, and even if they did recruit new people, it'd take too long to train them. Lepant continued by telling Sheena that not all Imperial soldiers were evil as he looked at Alan and Glenshiel. Sheena responded by saying that there are more important things to be doing than assigning military governors. Things like fixing the roads, as the roads had become quite rough due to the marching of troops throughout the war, which left them in such a bad state that they damaged the wheels of carriages. He also stated that the villages who sent their young men to war were left with small crop harvests and that they'll be worried about food for the coming winter. Sheena looked around the room and asked, "Aren't those the things we should be more concerned about?" Lepant called out Sheena's name in a strong tone as if to silence him and then exclaimed that the discussion is over. He then stated that the priority is strengthening the border and assigning military officials. Sheena tried to argue, but Lepant let out a sigh and told Sheena to leave the room. Sheena's cheeks flushed red in anger as he once again slammed his papers onto the desk before leaving the room and slamming the door. Sheena took a walk along the shore of Lake Toran to clear his head. He tried to understand his father's line of thinking, but he couldn't understand. The Scarlet Moon Empire had been ruled by an emperor whose power was absolute. Sheena felt that if they're establishing a new country, they should take a new approach to governance where everyone should be in agreement and that they should focus on the things that the people want. However, at the meeting he just attended, his father had been giving orders as if he had become the emperor. Everybody had been saying the structure of the country had changed, that it was a new nation from what it once was, but Sheena wasn't convinced that was the case, as his father's first action as president was to maneuver the army along the nation's border and towns while ignoring the problems that plagued the nation. Sheena wondered if he should talk to his mother about his father's behaviour, but he quickly changed his mind. As Sheena made his way back to the castle, he spotted Mine, one of the town's representatives, speaking with another representative. He took cover behind a rock and listened in on their conversation. The two were talking about the idea of the Toran Republic, how they don't believe it'll achieve anything, and that they doubt it'll last or be any better than the Empire, as they're a hodgepodge of people with different ideas and backgrounds. Their conversation soon turned to talking about how Eileen was once kidnapped by Krays and started questioning if a village headman like themselves could become king if they picked up a sword just like Lepant did. Just as Sheena was about to jump out and confront the two men, he felt a large hand grip his shoulder. He turned around and spotted his father Lepant behind him. Lepant walked past him and headed towards the two men, thanking them for visiting today and asking if they're waiting for the ferry to take them to the mainland. The men looked horrified. They feared that Lepant had overheard their conversation, and all they could mutter in response was "no problem." Lepant assured them that they're striving to build a better country, and he's looking forward to hearing their opinions. As the men boarded their ferry, Lepant turned to Sheena and told him that he'll be joining the next meeting as he's been appointed the role of a military officer. Sheena's face started burning red in anger. He asked his father what the hell he was thinking and reminded him that he's against the idea of having military governors. Sheena continued by also reminding his father that the war is over and that they shouldn't be focusing on an army but instead should be rebuilding the roads and maintaining farmland to feed the people. Lepant responded by telling Sheena that law and order is what the country needs right now, and if they can't settle matters through negotiations, then they must use force. Sheena glared at his father in disapproval and asked him if that's the kind of country he plans on building. He then told his father that he refuses to work in such a country, and with that said, Sheena turned his back to his father and walked inside the castle. As he was packing his things, he heard a knock on his door. He called out to enter and Tesla walked inside. With a sad look on his face, Tesla asked him if he's really planning on leaving, and Sheena responded that he is. Tesla tried to convince Sheena to stay by telling him that it's a pity they didn't listen to him about the townspeople's complaints about the roads being bad or that there wasn't enough food for the winter. He complimented Sheena for his considerate qualities and asked him to remain to help Lepant. Sheena responded by telling Tesla that he's leaving because he'll never meet a pretty young girl if he stays here in the castle. Tesla told him he didn't want to hear any jokes right now, and Sheena replied that there's nothing he can do here as he doesn't understand his father's thinking. Sheena then commented that if his father goes down the wrong path, he'll have to kill him. Tesla's expression changed as he remembered how Tir Makdal had to fight and kill his own father, Tio. Sheena wondered if he'd ever be able to defeat his father in a similar situation. Tesla asked Sheena if he was planning to say any farewells, and Sheena turned around to leave the room, but he spotted his mother Eileen standing at the door. Eileen smiled at him and offered him their family sword Kirinji, telling him that Lepant asked her to give him the sword. Sheena initially declined, stating that he doesn't want to carry such a weapon as he's nothing like his father. Eileen responded by saying that she doesn't know whose way of thinking is correct, Sheena's or Lepant's. She continued by telling Sheena that she wishes he'd take the sword as they don't know what he'll encounter on his journey, but if he doesn't want it, he can leave it. Sheena couldn't refuse his mother's request and took the sword, but complained about how heavy it was. Eileen replied that he should think of the weight of the sword as parental love. Sheena then said goodbye to his mother and made his way towards the docks to catch a boat to the mainland. It had been several days since Sheena left Toran Castle, and he decided to stop in a nearby town for some rest. He made his way to a tavern for a drink, but with no young women in sight, he decided to find an inn instead. As he passed by a rather expensive inn, he spotted a man in flashy garments standing outside. A young boy came running from inside the inn while carrying a heavy bucket filled with water. The boy stumbled and the water from the bucket splashed the man's shoes and pants. The man yelled at the boy in anger, and the boy repeatedly apologized while bowing his head. The man refused his apology and reached for a chunk of firewood to hit the boy with as his face burned red with anger. Without thinking, Sheena pulled out the rapier at his waist and slid between the man and the boy. As the man swung the firewood down as hard as he could, it broke the tip of Sheena's rapier. Sheena was stunned that his beloved blade would break so easily. The man angrily yelled at Sheena, demanding to know why he stopped him from hitting the boy. Sheena responded by saying, "Because you hit children with sticks." The man questioned why Sheena thinks it's so bad to punish servants for their failures, and Sheena responded that the man went too far. The man responded by saying that what he does with his property is his business. Sheena stated that he saw the whole thing, that the boy tripped over the man's leg, and being beaten for spilling some water is too heavy a punishment. The man was at a loss for words and didn't like being called out publicly in his behaviour. As Sheena drew Kirinji, he told the man that if he can't be convinced by discussion, then perhaps he can be convinced another way. Sheena then suggested that the boy's punishment should be to wash the man's pants, or to wash his horse, not to be beaten by a chunk of wood with such force that it breaks a blade. The man, who frightfully hadn't taken his eyes off Kirinji, nodded in agreement. The boy thanked Sheena for his help and ran back inside the inn. Sheena began walking away scratching his head. He still found Korinji to be quite weighty and uncomfortable to wield, and he wondered what he would have done if the man had been prepared to fight. Sheena thought to himself how nice it would be if there was a standard of judgment that everyone could understand. He then realized something. The laws his father had spoken about and the threats of force where diplomacy failed. That's exactly what Sheena had just done to protect the boy. Sheena then asked himself if there was any country where people lived without weapons. He began to wonder if everything that he couldn't see was reflected in his father's eyes, and he wondered if he'd become more like his father when enough time passes. And that's it for Sheena's story between the events of Suikoden 1 and 2. There are only 9 more character short stories to cover. You can find a list of all characters who receive short stories in the pinned comment. Let me know which one you want next. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.